Hello everyone and welcome back to the Droopytown network. Today we're going to unbox a Canon EOS-60D DSLR camera and do a hands-on tutorial of its features. Personally, I've been using a Canon Rebel T4i for about a year and have been wrestling with the idea of upgrading to a 60D. I'll be including some discussion of the T4i in comparative fashion, so this video is for people who are in a similar position of owning a Rebel model or deciding between purchasing a Rebel versus a 60D camera. I won't be doing any tests here as there are already many amazing resources reviewing the performance of these cameras, and I highly suggest you search on YouTube or Google for some great review videos. Because the T4i is 2 years newer than the 60D model, the relationship between these two models is very interesting. The T4i is part of the Rebel line of cameras, which is Canon's entry-level lineup, and theoretically it should be lower end compared to the 60D. The 60D right off the bat has more advanced functions and ergonomic features than the T4i. However, because the 60D is an older model, the T4i actually has some technological features that eclipse the 60D as well. These cameras are now priced very similarly in 2013 and contain distinct feature sets. And depending on your needs as a photographer, either of these cameras will make a great first or backup DSLR. Before we get to any further discussion of features, let's begin with the unboxing of the Canon EOS-60D. Okay, so on the box we have a picture of the camera and the 18-135 IS kit lens. So this is a box including both items, and this is the non-STM version of the lens. So it's the first 18-135, which optically isn't as good as the STM lens that comes with the Canon T4i. Now, on the side here we have a list of the contents. So we got just everything that's in the box, which we'll be taking a look at anyways. Taking a look at the back side of the box, we got system requirements for the software that comes with the camera. So you have basically software that opens the RAW files. You have software that allows for you to update the camera with lens profiles for the vignetting correction. So the software is very useful. Now we have documentation, it looks like. So the first thing I see here is the warranty cards, one for the lens, one's for the camera. Then we have the software disk for the software that was aforementioned. And here we got two very thick manuals. So one's in Spanish, one's in English, and these manuals give you so much information on how to operate the camera's various functions. Okay, so let's get to the other goodies in here. Alright, let's flip that open. And first things first, we have a charger. So this charger is much better than the T4i one. It connects to the wall right off the bat. There's a plug on the back that just flicks out, and I'll show you guys that in a sec. But this charger does not need to connect to a cord like the T4i one does, and it's a lot more convenient in that regard. So yeah, see, we can flick it out right here. And this is a world charger, so it works with 240 volts and 100 volts. So it's that range. It accepts any power input. But do note that when you use it with a 240 volt power connection, it does get very warm. Now we have the video cables here, RCA, connecting to the camera, so you can output the camera's image to a TV. Here we have a USB cable. So this is for connecting the camera to your computer. For the very few of you who don't have a card reader, this is the way you're going to transfer images to your computer. We have the LPE6 battery. So this is a battery that is a lot bigger. It has higher capacity than the LPE8 battery of the Canon T4i. And you can also see that just based on the numbers, this has a higher capacity as well. Next we have the camera strap, and this says EOS-60D on it, but the T4i version doesn't say T4i on it. It only says Canon, so I'm guessing that means having a digital Rebel is nothing to be proud of. Now we have the 18-135mm kit lens. This is the non-STM version of it, and I do actually own the STM version, so let me show you guys the difference between the two. Both cameras came with the version of Canon's 18-135mm lens. The STM version comes with the T4i, and this is the newer version of the lens that came out last year. The older micromotor version came out a while ago, and it comes with the 60D. Now the STM version is better in just about every way. It comes with the stepping motor, which is quieter, faster, and smoother in autofocus. So for video autofocus on the T4i, this is going to be a great feature. Now, video autofocus isn't available on the 60D, but you can still take advantage of the quietness and the quickness of the stepping motor. The other difference is the STM version has a decoupled focus ring, so that means I can do full-time manual focusing as long as I depress the shutter halfway. Whereas the older version of the lens, the ring is coupled because it's a conventional micromotor, so I have to switch to manual focus before moving the ring, otherwise it won't work, or I can just damage the motor by forcing it. Now, another difference between these two lenses is the lock switch on the STM version of the lens. You can see right here on the bottom, there's a lock switch to keep the lenses from creeping, but both lenses are built reasonably well. They don't have any lens creep issues at all, as I'm going to show you right now. See that? Yeah, so lock switch is just for security, not really necessary, and both these lenses are built similarly well. They both have metal mounts on the back here, so you can see right here it's definitely not as bad as some of the plastic mounts we've seen on other Canon lenses. Another thing is they both take the same filter size, 67 millimeters for each lens. You can see that they take pretty much the same filters, and the hood is the same too. EW73B is Canon's hood for both lenses, works on both. And the funny thing about that is the older version of the lens, which I bought more recently with the 60D, comes with the newer cap. The older cap is on the STM version, and you can see that it's a center pinch style on the lens on the right. So if I mount the hood on it, it'll be so easy to take off this cap because I can just pinch the center. Now, the older version, I can't really do that. So what I'm probably going to do is keep the STM version of the lens and basically switch caps. One more thing is the image quality. Obviously is the most important thing, and the image quality on the STM version is way better. Pretty much all reviews say that it's sharper across the board, has less chromatic aberration, so the STM lens by far is the much better option. So the 60D comes with pretty much an inferior lens. And here is the feature presentation. Finally going to get to the camera. Just let me pull this out of the box, and as I'm pulling this out, basically what's going to happen is I'm going to discuss the various features of this camera, and I'll also be comparing it to the T4i that I've owned for the better part of a year. The first thing that comes to mind when I hold the 60D is that it is a lot heavier and larger than the T4i. Now, of course, it pales in comparison to some of Canon's higher-end cameras, but after using the T4i for almost a year, when I grab onto the 60D, it's noticeably bigger and heavier. That said, I still think the 60D is better in handling, and it's simply because of this grip. Take a look at the T4i grip. It's shallow, there's not a lot to hold on to, and there's no indentation for your middle finger. Now look at the 60D grip. It's definitely beefier, there's more to grab onto, there's an indentation for your finger, your hand just falls right on it, it's so nice to grab onto and hold for long periods of time. Yes, I'm still talking about a camera, and this one's just simply more comfortable to hold, so I definitely give the point for handling to the 60D despite its weight. Alright guys, let's talk about the screen. The 60D's got a wonderful screen, but all I can do is look at it. The T4i on the other hand is a touchscreen. Look at this, I can zoom with my fingers, I can pan. It's just like a smartphone, guys. I can also select menu options just by pressing them instead of going through a bunch of menus. So really, that's an advantage the T4i has. The 60D is just a little too old for a touchscreen, but I know a lot of people are saying, oh, this is such a gimmick, I'll never use it, I'll get fingerprints that way on the screen. I'm just convinced those guys have never used a touchscreen on a Canon camera before, because if they've tried it, they'd realize that it's actually very well designed and it's no gimmick at all. But I do think that the 60D makes up for it by having superior physical controls. Check out the set dial. The 60D has it, the T4i doesn't. Now both cameras do share this dial on top next to the shutter button, but that just makes for one dial on the T4i. Now the 60D, when you have two dials, you can control aperture and shutter speed at the same time in manual mode. That's a huge feature. Now also, you can scroll through menu options on the 60D, so you don't have to press, the annoying D-pad on the T4i over and over again to get to something. Click, 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 click. It's just really inconvenient compared to the 60D. On top of the 60D, we got 4 dedicated controls for camera settings. There's AF, drive, ISO, and metering. The T4i has ISO on top, but the rest of the functions are combined with the D-pad. That's AF, drive, white balance, and picture styles. So while the 60D has metering, the T4i has picture styles and white balance, so it's actually better, which is surprising. But you can set the set button on the 60D to control white balance, so I guess things are kind of even. The 60D does have a secondary LCD on top though. That allows you to essentially turn off the main LCD to save power, because a secondary LCD has all the information you need. If you combine that with what you see in the viewfinder, you can take still photos with no problem. You only need the big LCD then to view existing photos, go into live view, or record videos. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the command dials for both cameras. On the 60D, they got an interesting design where there's a lock button, and you have to press that lock button while turning the command dial in order to turn it. On this T4i, you don't have to worry about that. You just turn it whenever you want. Some people may see it as a hindrance, others may see it as a feature. Either way, it is something different to highlight. Something of more importance though is probably the on-off switch on both cameras. It's designed differently on the T4i. The movie mode function is actually built into the T4i on-off switch, so that has a couple of implications. On the T4i, you actually flick it to movie mode, and then you can select what kind of exposure you want to do by moving the command dial. So if you want manual exposure, aperture priority, full auto, you change that using the command dial. So it's pretty intuitive. It's like taking stills. On the 60D though, I don't like it as much. You have to actually turn the command dial all the way to movie function. It's not part of the on-off switch. So that means then is you actually have to change the settings for movie mode by going to the menu. So see here, you have to go to movie exposure, choose manual or auto and do it there, as opposed to just turning the command dial, because obviously the command dial is the one that has the movie feature. So I don't think that's as convenient or as intuitive as the way it's done on the T4i. Speaking of movie recording, the 60D does lack a feature that the T4i has, and that's continuous autofocus during recording. If you look at the T4i here, I can activate AI servo mode, and the camera basically focuses on its own at any time. It doesn't need any input from me. It's not the fastest though, I do have to admit that, but it's still a nice feature to have if you want to basically record without having to control the camera. The 60D though, you'd have to autofocus by pressing the shutter during recording to obtain basically contrast detection autofocus, or you can select something called quick mode, which is what I'm going to show you here. Basically, the camera enters phase detection mode very quickly to obtain that focus because it is faster in phase detection, and then it goes back to live view. So this is a nice feature that the T4i didn't have, because it removed that, because I think Canon thought their AI servo mode was good enough to replace everything, but it isn't. So the 60D does have this asset on its side. Another difference between both cameras is the SD card slot door. On the T4i, I'm stuck with a boring one. I have to open it manually. Boo, boo. 60D though, check it out. Spring loaded. Yeah, right, awesome. Okay, it's not a big deal, but you know, it's a nice thing to have, and clearly it's a place where the T4i cut costs. Both cameras do only have a single card slot though. Now, on the 60D, I have a really nice viewfinder. This is a pentaprism, 96% coverage, 0.95x magnification. On the T4i, I'm stuck with a pentamirror, 95% coverage, 0.85x magnification. So that means that the 60D one is brighter and larger at the same time. Another thing that's great about the 60D is the white balance adjustment. Custom Kelvin temperature adjustments are so nice here because sometimes the presets just don't fit your lighting conditions, and it's really important to have these right in video because it's really hard to adjust white balance in post for video. For images, yeah, it's not as big a deal because raw images you can easily mess with in Lightroom. One last feature of the 60D that the T4i doesn't have is the electronic level. So I mean, these aren't a huge deal because even tripods have these built in, but I guess if you're hand holding, this is a nice thing to have, making sure the pictures you take aren't tilted one way or the other. So there you have it. Alright everyone, that's it for this unboxing and hands-on video of the Canon EOS-60D camera. I hope you enjoyed it, and I've come to my decision. I'm going to take the 60D over the T4i as my camera of choice. I had to make this decision, so I hope I've helped you guys make yours as well. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the Droopytown network for future videos. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See you later.